Thank you very much. It's good to be here, and it's good to see some familiar faces and a lot of new faces. So thank you for coming. And I think I probably should stand up here because they tell me the light's better here. Can you see me okay? Okay. The subject today is what I call the awakening. And the whole premise of this talk is to give you the sense that humanity is at a remarkable point of transition, and that a great awakening is in process. And I'm going to be presenting this idea, but from an esoteric point of view. There may be times when I use a term or two that is new to you, but when I do that, I'll define my terms along the way. But, you know, it's hard to sometimes fathom that we're in a time of difficulty, a time of optimism, and that's what I'm proposing. This is a time of optimism because it seems such a time of difficulty and stress and crisis. It's hard to see that this may be actually a window of opportunity, but indeed it is. You know, we're in a time when we look at the financial world and it seems to be falling apart. We're looking at the political system and it's a mess. We're looking at horrible genocide in different parts of the world, massive starvation in parts of the world, and it's hard to fathom that humanity is at an awakening point. But I want to give you this understanding. The most important principle to start this talk is this, that crisis is a prelude to all expansions of consciousness. Crisis is a prelude to all expansions of consciousness, and that applies both to the individual, you and I, as well as humanity as a whole. Now, one of the things that I want you to understand about how to look at this world situation is to realize that from the esoteric point of view, humanity is viewed as a single entity, as one living being, and that you and I are cells of consciousness within its beingness, and that entity is the thing that's evolving. That entity is a living, vibrant entity, and its structure, its nature of consciousness is exactly the same as the structure and nature of consciousness of a human being. The key idea here is to realize that humanity is one, and that underlying it all is the so-called soul of humanity. That not only is humanity one, but that it has a commonality of a higher consciousness. The soul of humanity represents the fusion of every individual soul into a profound singularity. And actually, the soul of humanity is actually greater than the sum total of every human soul combined. It's a synergistic soul. It's a synergy. And the soul of humanity is the subject of the day from a certain perspective. Because when I say to you, humanity is on the verge of an awakening, I'm really saying that humanity is on the verge of awakening to its own soul nature, its own soul nature. But humanity also has a personality, just like you and I do. A higher and a lower nature. And the lower nature is the world we see and the way we are, the way we've been historically. But the higher nature of humanity is the part of us that we recognize a higher set of principles. We recognize a higher quality of life. We recognize that underlying all of the diversity of human expression, that there is a fundamental commonality. And that oneness is so important to keep in mind, that oneness is realized on a couple levels. At first glance, when we say, oh, humanity is one, well, yes, humanity is one, but we typically think about that in terms of we have a commonality of the human experience. And that's true. That's true. But deeper than that, there's a place inside, deep inside each of us, where we touch a larger soul, and that larger soul is the soul of humanity. And that's what we're waking up to today. Now, what's happening is this. As I said, crisis is a prelude to all expansions of consciousness. And we see crisis now on a global level. Think about it in your own life for a minute. Think about those times when you and we've been in crisis points. Maybe you've had a relationship crisis, or maybe you've had a career crisis, whatever it is. I know for myself, when I go through periods of crisis, it often feels like, my goodness, I'm in front of this black cloud and there's no hope. There's no way I'm going to get through it. How in the world am I going to survive this? And, the only attitude that I tend to take is, just take one step at a time and don't worry about how it's going to end. And then miraculously, at least in my own experience, it's that I find myself down the road on the other side of that black cloud. On the other side of that black cloud, and I look back at it and I say to myself, wow, I made it through that. Sometimes it's hard to believe that I got through that. But what's more important than the fact that I got through it was that I now know myself differently. I'm different. I'm not the same person I was on the other side of the cloud. I feel wiser. I feel more whole. I feel more optimism about the next step. And that's what I'm proposing is going on today. Humanity is facing an enormous set of crises. And at face value, it looks like it's all falling apart. But it's actually the darkness before the dawning hour. One of the things that you start to realize when you study your own experience of consciousness is that our evolution is cyclic and has a wave nature to it. Have you ever had this happen to you where, sometimes you feel like, you're really making progress in your spiritual life. Maybe you've had several days of wonderful meditations. You feel aligned. You feel like you're almost, it feels like you're connected to the soul and the spirit beyond. And then, for some strange reason, you find yourself falling back and slipping back into much more primitive behaviors. And it's frustrating, isn't it? I mean, it's frustrating because you feel like you made some gains and then you fall back. What happens is this. We have to understand that it would be great if the way evolution worked was that consciousness was this glide upward. Wouldn't that be great? Be great. But it's just not that way. Instead, what it does is it's a wave pattern. It's a wave pattern like this that's tending upward, but has highs and lows along the journey. Now, when we look at humanity, these days, it's pretty clear that we're on a downslope. Things are falling apart. And if we only hold the view from a short perspective, that is to say, if we only look at what's going on in the last 10 or 20 years, it really seemed like it's falling apart. But I'm saying to you that downtrend is only creating a sense of despair because we are using a short view to see it. Let's expand it out. Let's think about humanity from the last 500 years. And if you study human consciousness over centuries, you find that there is this constant rhythm, a rise and fall. In fact, the rise and fall of civilizations are an outpicturing of that very thing. And that in the big picture, it's not gloom and doom at all. Indeed, the downturn that we're in is true, but it's still within a larger upward trend. And that's what I want to reiterate here to you today, is that in the big picture, we're moving upward. In the little picture, we're moving downward. Now, crisis is a prelude to all expansions of consciousness. In the esoteric philosophy, we're given to understand that not only is humanity a living entity, and it has a soul, and it has a personality, and just like you and I, when our higher consciousness goes into conflict with the lower consciousness, we can go into crisis. So too, the same is true with humanity. And not only is humanity one, but in this philosophy, it's understood that social systems are also entities. Social systems, whether we're talking politics, science, the arts, business, all of those are categories of human consciousness struggling to evolve to a higher order. All of them are viewed as living entities in a certain sense, and all have a soul, and all have a personality. And why I'm bringing this up is because often when we look out at the world and the problems that are out there, we often think about casting blame, as if we look at the business world and say, you're to blame, or we look at the politicians and say, you're to blame. But we often cast the net of blame too wide. We often forget that the thing that you're criticizing is not the institution in its wholeness, it's only the lower nature of the institution. It's only the personality of business that is the culprit. Let us not forget that there's the soul of business. It's only the selfish nature of politicians sometimes that are the culprit. But the soul of politics is as sacred as the soul that's inhabiting you. Social systems are living entities, and they're struggling over the vastness of time to evolve to a higher order. Now, one of the interesting things about understanding this notion of how crisis emerges is that when a higher category of consciousness is trying to impress itself into the lower part of consciousness, in yourself or humanity as a whole, or a social system, you would think that it would cause all of us to feel collectively more at one. And to some extent, there's some truth to that. But also what happens is this: when the soul of humanity, which is an agent of unity, tries to more fully impress itself into the personality of humanity, we call that the process of soul infusion, that shadow elements within that personality become fearful and rise in defiance. Rise in defiance. So much of the problems of the world today, where, think about it, in the last few years, we've seen the worst of business. We've seen the worst of politics. We've seen the worst of nations. We've seen the shadow in every department. And that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing, because those shadow elements were always there. But now a higher value system, the soul of humanity, is slowly trying to impress itself on humanity. And that jars loose those lower aspects of consciousness, those shadowy elements. It jars them loose, brings them to the surface. And again, they rise in defiance of the higher consciousness that's trying to infuse itself. So that's why when I see the world today and I see all of this negativity expressing itself, all I can say is, yes, fantastic, fantastic. Because how can we change anything unless we see it? And this is the opportunity to see it. You see? So, in the esoteric philosophy, it's understood that humanity is said to be approaching what is called the first initiation. The first initiation. Now, the first initiation is a reference to a measure of infusion that the soul has succeeded in transforming the lower self. Think of initiations as steps, incremental steps that lead toward full enlightenment. And think of the soul in you or in the nation or in humanity. Think of the soul as being that higher part of you that's slowly trying to infuse itself into the lower part of you. And over many incarnations, that personality tendency slowly gives a little up, slowly lets go of the reins, very slowly. But there's a sequence where the major letting go occurs. And the first initiation it's interesting. It's been called in some of the ancient literature, it's been called the birth of the Christ within the heart. So it has a lot to do with the idea of awakening to the quality of unitive love. which is what I mean when I use the word Christ. Christ represents the unitive principle in creation, the underlying quality of oneness that we can sense within humanity. That's the Christ. That's the Christ principle. The birth of the Christ within the heart is a reference to the birth of the awareness of that principle playing out through all of humanity. And that's what's happening today. We're starting to wake up to our oneness. More than ever before, we're seeing the commonality of our human experience. And some of it's helpful that we have technology that's helping us do that. The internet is a fantastic tool to see immediately the circumstances of people in other cultures. And no matter how different that other culture is, as you look at it and observe it and learn about it, you find that in essence, it's just like you. It's just like you. That person who lives in the desert or who lives in the jungle is just like you. There's that sense of recognizing that we are really one. But the thing that's so interesting about this first initiation process, which, by the way, is going to take decades to complete the first initiation. This is not something that's going to happen just right now. It's something that is slowly happening. It's been in process for decades already, but it's in process, and I would say probably by the middle of the century, the process will be complete. But one of the things about the first initiation is this. Not only do we start to sense more fully that underlying our diversity is this fundamental oneness, but also we start to recognize that there is a need to transform our relationship to the outer world. See, the first initiation is very much related to mastery of your physical appetites. In you and I individually, the first initiation has much to do with the indwelling soul taking dominion over the unbridled appetites of the physical life, so that a higher value system, a higher part of you, has an overshadowing, controlling relationship to your physical appetites. But it also has a lot to do, when an individual takes the first initiation, it's not only that they've developed a certain mastery over their physical appetites, but also that they start to develop a different relationship to how to relate to the outer world and to resources and to people. New kinds of understandings of what constitutes right relationship are emphasized, and how to rightly relate to resources. See, that's so interesting to me. It's so interesting that the first initiation has so much to do with re-looking at how your relationship to resources and money. And here we are in a position where the whole world is now forced to look at their relationship to money. You see, the business world, it's providing us a tremendous opportunity to see through its failure and through the failure of the stock market. We have a tremendous opportunity to see how we've been in wrong relationship with resources. The tendency has been for a long time to acquire resources and the tendency to hoard, the tendency to take care of yourself and hope for the best for the rest of the world. And yet the movement is to recognize that resources are here for all of us, and that that it has been said that the destiny of the business world, or the soul of business, is ultimately to facilitate right distribution of resources for the sustenance of all life. That's its goal. That's its goal. But what we've seen is the personality of the business world and its shadowy elements that have recently been exposed in a way we haven't seen in a long time. And so we see that with this whole question of economic crisis, because it's global, it's touching everyone, it's very much correlates to this idea of humanity approaching the first initiation. How do we get into right relationship with resources? The other clue to this is found in the whole environmental movement, because that's another question of search for right relationship. We've seen how relationship to Mother Nature has been atrocious. For centuries, we've been abusing Mother Nature. We've had a sense of being isolated as if somehow we rise above Mother Nature rather than to realize that we are constituent parts of Mother Nature. And Mother Nature is resource. I mean, that's resource. And now we're forced, in crisis, we're forced to face that very thing and turn it around. Further evidence that we approach the first initiation. And that's why I'm so optimistic about the future. I think that there's so much possibility here. Each of these social institutions are institutions that have a higher and lower nature, and although the business world is the one that's really being glaringly put in front of us to see and see its shadow, we're seeing shadow elements coming forth from the world of economics, the world of education, the world of science, the world of politics. Those shadow elements are rising to the surface. How well can we transform them? That's the clue. That's the question. Can we do it? Can we do it? It has been said that we are right now living in a time called the burning ground period. It's an interesting term, the burning ground. It's got this sense of walking on hot coals. I don't know about you, but when I watch the news, it sure looks like we are walking on hot coals. The burning ground, it's the crisis that is always in front of the door of opportunity, the door of initiation, the door of expanded consciousness, and we're walking it now. We're walking it now. And the goal is to get into right relationship. Right relationship. But very interestingly, all of you have a part to play in it too. Each one of us has a part to play in this. Because you see, centuries ago, in some of the ancient esoteric literature, we were given to understand that as we transition from the 20th century to the 21st century, that would be what is called the era of the forerunner. The era of the forerunner. And that's an era that has to do with not only walking the burning ground, but also many, many people, a growing number of people are recognizing that they have a piece of the answer. Every one of you in this room, I suspect, has a piece of the answer. And so much of the future and how to traverse this burning ground has to do with how well do we walk that burning ground by supporting a higher vision of where we're going. It's one thing to walk a burning ground without a sense of a positive end. That sounds pretty bleak. But it's another thing when we can feel that there's a shining future, a golden opportunity at the other side, and there is. Each one of you has the capacity to be an agent on behalf of the soul of humanity. You and I have the capacity to be a voice for that greater soul. When you align with your higher consciousness, when you sense higher sets of principles that are starting to intuitively penetrate into your thinking process, you are receiving insight from your own causal body, which is a word we use to describe what the soul is. You are getting insight from your own higher nature. And remember, your causal body, your soul, is a cell within that larger soul. You know, everybody's looking for purpose. I mean, I do a lot of counseling with people, and everybody wants to know what's their spiritual purpose. And there is such a thing as spiritual purpose. But in a higher sense, it's a universal purpose. And that is to be a servant on behalf of the greater life. To be a servant on behalf of that one larger human soul, humanity's soul, and be an agent that supports its expression. We're moving astrologically from a great Piscean cycle to an Aquarian cycle. And it's so interesting that transition astrologically is actually very, very related to the crisis we're experiencing now as well. In a certain sense, there's an old order, an old way of being that's deeply entrenched in humanity. And it's fearful. And then there's a new order, of which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, the idea of a higher set of possibilities, a new way of looking at life, a new movement that supports unity through diversity, for instance. We're in a great transitional period, And what happens is at the end of any kind of cycle, whether it's an astrological cycle or some other type of cycle, at the end of a cycle, you will always have an increase in crystallization. What I mean by that is that when a cycle is coming to an end, the qualities that are demonstrated in that cycle become concretized and rigid and fearful. A good example of that is today we see in religion, we see that the fastest growing branch of all world religions is fundamentalism. The fundamentalist theology by far is the fastest growing branch of all religions. And not just Christian, but Islamic fundamentalism, Hindu fundamentalism. What that is that that's actually evidence of the decay of an old thought form, an old way of looking at things. And that decay, as the cycle is coming to its end, you get more and more fundamentalist tendencies. You get more and more fear of the future. Now, one of the scary things about that in this particular example is that fundamentalism in theology, when we see that, there are what are called glamours that arise. Glamours represents distortions of truth. And one of the great glamours associated with the decline in the current spiritual approach, the Piscean approach, is that the glamour of martyrdom arises. And that's a very dangerous glamour, the glamour of martyrdom. And we see it now. That's further evidence of a decline. But at the same time, there's a group of people that's growing, now in their millions, who are advocating a new order, a new way of looking at life, advocating the principles that will take us into the future. So we've got two massive poles within humanity, a pull toward the future and a resistance and a yearning to go back to the past. So many people say, I want to go back because I can at least rely on those old ways. One of the amazing things about the journey is that, what is human evolution anyway when you think about it? We think that, we've been taught that Darwinian thinking is the way to understand human evolution, but that's not correct. It's consciousness that's evolving. It's human consciousness that's evolving. But how does it evolve? Well, it evolves through the utilization and adoption of new ideas. We take in new ideas, we apply them, they enrich us, they expand our horizons, they facilitate the evolution of culture and civilization. And in that sense, they're wonderful. But what happens is over time, those ideas, eventually they give us everything they can. And by the way, I'm not talking just about religious ideas, political ideas, all kinds of social ideas. They give us everything they can. And then it's time to look at new ideas. But the problem is that the old idea has been so ingrained in the way we do things that it becomes crystallized and it becomes rigid. There's an old saying, that which is your temple today will become your prison tomorrow. That which is your temple today will become your prison tomorrow. The ideas that we adopt, even today, the progressive ideas that we adopt today will become a hindrance in the future, you see? And what's happening is that at the end of a great cycle for humanity, we're seeing the prison. We're seeing the prison of old ideas. In some of the ancient literature, those old ideas have a name. They're called the ancient fires. The ancient fires. What are ancient fires? That's the fire and the power inherent in old ideas. And they're rigid. That's where we're at today in virtually all of our social institutions. We have a lot of ancient fire that's rising up in defiance. When I said, the shadow elements earlier, I talked about the shadow arising. That's just like saying old ideas are rising, old perspectives are rising. But the thing to understand is when we move into this new era, it's not about saying, forget you folks, you're out of here, you don't see the vision, we do, we're going to go for it, because it's all one. Knowing, they say, every weary pilgrim must come home. was the old saying. And so how do we transform the old? How do you transform the old and carry the best of it into the new? That's what has to be done here. One of the secrets to understanding how to deal with the ancient fires that it will help in this awakening process for all of us is to, number one, remember that old idea that is getting in the way, number one, remember it was a new idea at one time. We often forget that. And it was very sacred at one time. But I'd like to give you another notion of how to understand ideas. A thought is also like a living entity. An idea is an entity, and it has a soul, and it has a personality as well. One of the challenges as we move into the future and try to transform old ideas in support of the future is to look beyond just the form of the old idea and try to sense what is the sacred essence at the core. What is the sacred principles at the core of old ideas? That's another way of saying it, is what is the soul of the old idea? And how do we reach that soul, that deeper quality? I'll give you an example. I often I can think of a couple people right now in our recent history that are good examples of this. Let's look at Osama bin Laden, okay? You look at Osama bin Laden, there's a man who is someone who the thought forms that he is using, the sacred principles are profound. This is a man that is completely dedicated to serving the greater life. This is a person that has literally, talk about devotion to greater life. That's it. I mean, the man even lives in a cave to demonstrate his commitment to that. So the principle of devotion to greater life is a sacred principle. It's as sacred as love itself. But the form that he is using to carry forward that sacred principle is a form that we outlived 2,000 years ago. It's an archaic form. Do you follow me on this? It's an old form. And yet the sacred principle is still sacred. And the key is to transforming the old is to first find the sacred principle that's inside that old idea. And in your own way, through your language, through your presence, through the way you interact with people, those people that are holding those ideas, find a way of sensing that core truth and lift it in honor through your language, through your presence. And as you lift it in honor, begin to massage how the form of it could be reformed. But as you do that, never drop this hand. I'm trying to give you a kind of an abstract way of looking at how to transform the old, because we have to transform the old. We have to. And that brings me to another point. What is it in us that it gives us the capacity to look beyond the form? And it's the third eye. You know, some people in the spiritual community, people talk about the third eye a lot. But really, what is it? And how would you know if it's open? And the answer is that the third eye makes it possible to sense the underlying qualities that are behind the form. The third eye is that part of you that can look beyond appearance to sense the deeper principles that are struggling to express themselves through the form and are doing it at different degrees of inadequacy or adequacy. When you start to look at life and look at the world, it's all about looking behind the scenes, metaphorically, behind the form to sense what is this, what are the qualities that are struggling to emerge through this? What is the quality that's struggling to emerge through Osama bin Laden? Well, one of them is devotion to greater life. But we lose sight of that quality because we're so disgusted by the form that it's more difficult to look inside the form to see what is the sacred quality. It has been said, a great master once said, find the golden thread of truth within illusion. Find that golden thread. And be an agent in support of its upliftment. What I'd like to do today is I'd like to share with you some ideas that I can offer you to be a better agent in support of the soul of humanity at this critical time. You might say some techniques, some skills, okay? One of the things I'd like to say is this. We need to get away from looking at the world and saying to ourselves, this is good and this is evil. Or, this is right and this is wrong. So much of the problems of the world today are based upon that very, very primitive perspective on human life. You see, the thing is this. When you really think about it, there is no such thing as something that's purely evil out there, purely good. Everything is a mixture of both darkness and light. Everything. Everything is a mixture of both darkness and light. The question that must arise when we try to navigate and to make good decisions on behalf of humanity is not where is goodness and where is evil, what's good and what's bad. Instead, it's about asking yourself, what is the proportion of light and dark in this option versus the proportion of light and dark in this option, and in that relativity, we can make wise decisions. But to stoop to such a simplistic way of looking at it that says this is good and this is evil is a very, very primitive attitude, a very primitive way. And yet you see a lot of that, particularly as we end this cycle, and there's a rigidity of consciousness. The ancient fires tend to be very black and white in that sense. One time I had somebody say to me, I did a talk and there was a woman in the audience who was a born-again Christian, I think. All evidence pointed that way. And she said to me, she raised her hand, she said, "Do you believe in the Antichrist?" I said, "Well, actually I do." And then I said to her, "I could even tell you who it is." That caught her attention. "Really? You can tell me who the Antichrist is?" "Yes, I can." "I'll tell you, if you want to see the Antichrist, here's what you have to do. Just simply look in the mirror. Look in the mirror." And by the way, if you want to see the Christ, look in the mirror. And you see, you don't even have to move. You and I are a place where those two forces come together. The Christ is just the word used to represent the quality of unity and wisdom and love. And Antichrist is just a word that represents anything antithetical to the principle of unity. We don't have to go out looking for an Antichrist over here. That's a projection. It's right here. It's right here. You're the interface. So when I said earlier, I said we got to get away from this idea that there's good and evil and that it's a mixture of both. All we have to do is look in the mirror to see that in ourselves. You and I are evidence of that very thing. Back to the bigger picture, so is humanity, evidence of that very thing. So is every social institution, evidence of that very thing. Every institution has a higher nature that's trying to evolve, express itself, and every institution has a lower part of itself that is fearful and defiant. Our job, your job, is to be an agent in support of that higher nature. That's your job. That's my job. And you can do that to the extent that you can live from your own higher nature and get away from this black and white thinking. So that's one area that I want to offer you as a suggestion to help facilitate the soul of humanity at this interesting time in history. Another thing is that, and I just kind of mentioned it again, is that really start to look at social institutions as living things, as living entities, and don't cast your perspective on it in a blanket way. See what is the higher nature of that institution and what is the lower nature of that institution. Because that institution has a divine mandate, it has a purpose, It facilitates the evolution of a category of humanity's consciousness. Every institution, politics, science, the arts, religion, all of them are needed. All of them are integral in our movement toward a more perfect expression of our divinity. So let's look deeper and see what is the soul in that institution. Another quality that I'd like you to consider is this. Get accustomed to the hill and valley experience on the journey. Get accustomed to it. Don't be alarmed by it. It's that wave pattern again. It's that wave pattern. Just remember this, if you want to know where you are on the path individually, you're never as evolved as your high moments in consciousness would suggest. Never.
Well, they're the covenant.
And you're never as unevolved as the low moments would indicate. Where are you? You're in the mean. Your place on the path is in the mean between the extremes of spiritual elation and back to being an animal. You're in the middle. And the reason why we get pulled back, the reason why you tend to get pulled back and revert to more primitive behaviors is because the lower consciousness, what we call form-based consciousness, that part of you has had the historical advantage for thousands and thousands of years and incarnations. You see, the evolution of consciousness is that first lower consciousness is developed and perfected, and ego really reigns, leading to the readiness for higher consciousness to start to impress it. But that lower consciousness, it has had the historical advantage. So through the habit of being identified with form over thousands of lives, the pull is to pull you back, to pull you back. Whereas this higher part of you, that loftier, wiser part that you sense inside, that soulful part of you, that's relatively new in your awareness. And that part of you is subtler, and therefore it takes more time. It doesn't have as strong a grip yet, but the day will come. It's just the pattern of the old is habitually very strong, and that's what causes us often to get pulled back. But here's what I found in my own journey about this that I hope can be of help to you. A few years ago, I was looking at my own life in this wave pattern, and I realized that this very thing I just told you, that I'm not as evolved as my high moments would suggest or as low as the low would suggest, that I'm in the middle. But what's so interesting about that is when you accept that, and you accept the idea that there is this valley and hill experience, then you are less likely to identify with the highs and say, this is me, or identify with the lows and say, this is me, and instead you remain more inwardly centered, knowing both of those are extremes, and because you have stayed center and not identified with the high or low, those highs and lows seem less high and low. It's as if the very fact that you, when you're feeling like you're really aligned and this is me, you're identifying with it, and that very fact is amplifying it. And the same is true on the low end of the cycle. You're depressed. Oh, I thought I was more evolved as this. My goodness, I'm acting like I did 20 years ago. You know, I thought I solved this addiction problem and now it's gotten me again. Whatever it is, the very fact that you have no longer are identified with it, but you're still experiencing it, it lessens the magnitude of it. So it was a big discovery for me that the hill and valley is still there, but now the extremes are not as great because I'm not caught in riding the wave with it. Does that make sense? Do you follow that? Okay. Another thing I'd like you to keep in mind is this, that the formulation of truth as we evolve, the formulation of truth should be understood as partial and as relative to the times. You see, it's back to what I said earlier. So much of the challenge that we face today is there's a pressure we want to adopt new ideas, but there's a huge wave of tendency to stick with the old. The old truths served us at one time, but now new truths have to be coming into play. So instead of seeing truth in an absolute sense, it's important to start to see truth in a relative sense, relative to the times, relative to what is needed now. Which, by the way, means that you become less partisan the more you understand that. Indeed, if I even looked at it just in the world today and say American politics, I'm sure that most of us are probably have leanings in one political party or the other, but the truth is that neither is better than the other or worse than the other. Both political parties hold at their core sacred principles. The soul is its deeper truth, but the form is the problem, and the form outlives its usefulness. And so it's not surprising, I talked about cycles earlier and how we go through cycles and we're in this big astrological cycle, but you see it even in political cycles, The Republicans hold the government for a long time and they do a lot of things and the way is clear, only to arrive at the end of its cycle and everything is crystallized and dogmatized and falling apart, which launches a new pattern. You see it in political behaviors as well, this pattern of rise and fall. So I guess what I'm saying is that one of my favorite authors is Kyle Gibran. All of you familiar with The Prophet? You remember The Prophet? Yeah. I love what he says in the Prophet. He says, "Say not, I have found the truth. Say rather, I have found a truth. Say not, I have found the path to the soul. Say rather, I have met the soul walking upon my path." You see, there's something about understanding that none of us see the truth. None of us see the truth, but every one of us sees a piece of it. That's another very important principle as we go into the future. None of us see the truth, but each of us has a piece of it. The other thing I want you to understand is that in a way, the question of peace is a big question. We have this wonderful symbol of peace here. But I find that in the spiritual community, there's a bit of a misunderstanding about peace. We're all striving for peace. Peace is the long-term goal. But what we're starting to realize is that there's a difference between peace and appeasement. And oftentimes what people say is peace is actually appeasement. Appeasement. Real peace, real harmony has to be earned. And it's usually earned through the crucible of conflict and struggle. And it has been said that that's the note of human evolution. It's harmony through conflict. Not harmony and conflict, harmony through conflict. And sometimes when we want peace, it's really our lower self that is feeling so discomforted by the angst of the tension that we seek a solution that represents stepping down to the lowest common denominator and say, okay, we found peace. When that's not peace, that's appeasement, that's a backward motion. That's a backward motion. If we really want peace, we have to earn it. We have to earn it. The other thing is this, that having to do with that, is that where is the source of all conflict anyway? As we move into this awakening time, we better get a handle on where is the root of conflict. The biggest conflict inherent in humanity, inherent in the human condition, is the conflict between our own higher and lower nature. Our own duality is the biggest source of conflict. We see and sense the animal within us, but we also sense that higher potential. And we want to live more and more according to that higher nature. But that as we strive or aspire to that higher nature, you find that the lower nature becomes more obvious to you. And the real battle is the transformation of our own lower nature so that it becomes cooperative with the higher. And in a certain sense, all problems in the world, whether it's interpersonal conflict, international conflict, or even war, in a certain sense, that's just the outpicturing of the more fundamental archetype of conflict inherent in the human condition. And that is the realization that we are dual. Each one of us, there's two of us. There's two of us, a higher and lower. And it's about that transformation. And then we project our inner conflict into the outer world. And sometimes war is the result. We're the first kingdom of nature that senses our own duality. We're the first kingdom of nature that has the power to introspect and to see a deeper part of yourself. And with that comes great reward. And with that comes a recognition of our duality and therefore conflict. So if we honor that, if we recognize that, then we start owning it in ourselves. Each one of you is an agent on behalf of the greater life. Each one of you, to the extent that you can live according to those higher promptings, transform the lower part of you so that it becomes more cooperative and less resistant to the higher part of you. All of those efforts support the soul of humanity at this dawning opportunity. I am so excited about this time, so excited about the opportunity to bring the best I have in me, and many of you probably feel the same way. So I just want I want to leave you with that idea that this is the time. This is the time. And I hope that, and by the way, you're not alone. They're in the millions. In the esoteric philosophy, it's called the new group of world servers. The new group of world servers. The sum total of all people in the world that have a sense of their higher nature and are committed to living it as best they can and contributing to an awakening for humanity as best they can. That new group of world servers, we are told that the masters, the liberated masters like the Christ or the Buddha, they look at the whole new group of world servers and call it the world disciple. They see it as a single entity, the world disciple. You're part of that. You're part of that. So the time is now. The time is now to be part of that awakening. And I invite you all to seize the moment, as they say. And on that note, I'm just going to say thank you for coming tonight, and let's take advantage of the moment. Thanks.